news comes first. This is ABC-7 Extra.
ABC-7 Extra. Good evening. I'm Stephanie Guadian. For the next half hour, we will be talking about U.S. immigration and deportation. The Homeland Security Department has drafted sweeping new guidelines aimed at aggressively detaining and deporting immigrants living in the U.S. illegally. That is according to a pair of memos signed by DHS Secretary John Kelly. Within the past week, the borderland has seen an ICE operation at a Las Cruces mobile home park. Officials say that they were looking for people with criminal histories or a valid deportation order from a judge. Still, that sparked a protest. Dozens of protesters walked the streets for about a half hour, eventually sitting in the street and blocking an intersection. No hate, no fear. Immigrants are welcomed here, the protesters chanted. Then surveillance video showing two ICE agents in plain clothes entering the El Paso County Courthouse to take an undocumented immigrant into custody. She was there allegedly to get a protective order, even though the woman has a criminal record. County officials say that she is still entitled to protection. That story gaining national attention. My guest tonight is immigration attorney Melissa Lopez. She will give her legal insight and advice, and we want to hear from you tonight. You can email us your comments and questions right now to ABC-7 Extra at KVIA.com. You can also leave a message or a question by calling 915-496-1771, and you can tweet me at Guadian ABC7 using the hashtag ABC7 Extra. And we begin with that ICE operation in Las Cruces this week. Protesters took to the streets after people living at a mobile home park woke up to ICE agents knocking on their doors. ICE maintains during the operations, agents were looking for people with criminal histories or a valid deportation order from a judge. That hasn't stopped many people in the borderland from feeling on edge. ABC7's Jamie Warren has this story.
No hate, no fear. Immigrants are welcome here.
Dozens of protesters walked the streets of downtown Las Cruces for about a half hour, eventually sitting in the street and blocking a major intersection. This was all sparked by the ICE operation.
There are so many of our communities that are being threatened right now and told that they don't belong here. And this is one of our last resorts. We have to protect our communities.
Still scary because they were wanting to come into our house without any reason at all.
Yuvia Sanchez says after showing the officers her ID, they looked in her backyard, then moved on to other homes. She says some of her neighbors were taken into custody.
My husband said that they had a big white van and there was 4 or 5 people in there when he left.
Neighbors who live in this neighborhood also tell me they experienced immigration officials scouring the area. One girl even says her cousin got approached by them while she was driving.
They stopped her, pulled her over, and asked for her immigration status.
I don't have words for it. It's not good.
This resident has lived here for over 20 years and says she's now considering moving.
It's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse.
I never thought it would happen. Phoenix, Colorado, anywhere else but here.
And that was Jamie Warren reporting for us. Las Cruces Police Chief Jaime Montoya said no arrests were made during the protest. ICE maintains that these are targeted operations. They're looking for people with criminal histories or a valid deportation order from a judge. They say that they're simply continuing what they were doing before President Trump took office. Joining us now is immigration attorney Melissa Lopez. I want to thank you very much for being with us here tonight. Again, these federal agents are saying that they're continuing doing the same thing that they're doing when President Obama was in office. Some people question that, though.
Yeah, I don't know how true that really is. The reality is that we hadn't ever heard, we hadn't heard in the past 8 years of operations of this sort, and so many so close together. We had a number of things happen over the course of the last week and a half that are concerning to people, and this is not something that has happened. I've been an immigration attorney here for 9.5 years, and this is not a pattern that we've had to deal with on a regular basis.
Okay, by what's happening, does it concern you?
Definitely. I think what it does is it creates a sense of fear in the community. You know, we've heard stories of people that have said that they don't want to leave their house because they're scared of what might happen if they leave their house. They don't want to send their kids to school because, again, they're scared of what might happen if they send their kids to school. They're scared if they send their kids to school that their kids might come home to an empty house. I mean, there's any number of things and fears that people have. And so when you have actions like this that are so public, all it does is create a huge sense of fear in the community.
I think many people might argue, though, that if they are here legally, that there is nothing to fear and that these ICE agents are, again, just looking for people who are in the country illegally. Sure, and that's, you know, that's what ICE always says. However, we always hear reports. For example, there was a woman speaking at a press conference on Friday that was held by the Border Network for Human Rights, who stated that ICE officers walked up to her, showed her husband and her a photograph of a man that they were looking for. She told them, you know, we don't know who that is, and she was trying to be helpful, and they ended up detaining her husband, putting her husband under arrest and telling her that they're going to detain her as well. And so even in situations where people are trying to be helpful to law enforcement, they're finding themselves detained, and of course that's scary for people. Okay, I want to go ahead and share some Facebook comments that people are leaving on our Facebook page, and the first one is from Jane Williams Haddix, and Jane writes, "No one is deporting immigrants, only those who are here illegally, meaning they sneaked in and never bothered to show their respect for this country by getting proper documentation. They are in danger of being returned to the country where their legal residence and citizenship is. Those who have documentation are immigrants. Those who hate the U.S. so that they are unwilling to get documentation are illegal invaders and should be treated as such." We have another one to share with you. This is from Paula Pannell Overstreet. She says, "I see a lot of people who need to go back and study world history and American history. They might also want to brush up on the definition of illegal immigrant." A lot of emotions surrounding immigration and deportation issues. Do you think this is just going to intensify moving forward?
I think unfortunately it is. I think, you know, we look at the issue as an issue of human rights and human dignity, and I think unfortunately that's not the case, as you can tell from those Facebook comments, right? I mean, you know, if it were simple enough for people to get their immigration status, then I wouldn't have a job. But the reality is that the system is incredibly complicated, and the system doesn't create an avenue for a lot of people to obtain a benefit. Many times, despite their willingness and strong desire to obtain legal status, it's just not possible.
So is that something that can be worked on, improving the immigration application process?
Sure, I think that's a big, you know, step that needs to be taken. Is if we want to focus so much on, you know, keeping the country safe, well then we need to give people an avenue for obtaining status lawfully. You know, there have been guest worker programs in the past that have been quite successful, and so why not look at some of those options again in the future? And definitely in terms of comprehensive immigration reform, that's long overdue.
Okay, President Trump has talked about even more intensive vetting. Why is it so hard to get through that application process? Why has it been so hard in the past?
Because the system has limitations in terms of the number of people that can obtain a benefit per year. And the numbers on which those numbers are based is our census numbers from the early 20th century. And so we're basing our current immigration patterns on the patterns of 100 years ago. And so what it's done is it's created a limitation on the number of people on how quickly people can apply for status. For example, if you're the child of a permanent resident and you're married, you're going to wait 20 to 25 years before you can lawfully obtain a green card.
Okay. Well, there was another incident in the borderland involving immigration agents this past week. This one gaining national attention. We want to show you some surveillance video that was taken inside and outside the El Paso County Courthouse. Officials say that federal immigration agents detained a transgender woman seeking a protective order for alleged domestic violence while she was inside the courthouse. Several El Paso County officials say that agents detained Irvin Gonzalez when she left a courtroom on February February 9th. Immigration officials say that Gonzalez has been convicted of crimes, including assault and larceny, and has been deported 6 times. ICE says she was detained outside the courthouse, but there are some discrepancies between the affidavit and the courthouse surveillance video you are looking at right now. Congressman Beto O'Rourke, along with the county leaders, held a news conference after speaking with ICE officials. County Judge Veronica Escobar and County Attorney Joanne Bernal joined O'Rourke for that conversation. One major question the congressman wanted to clear up was whether the incident at the courthouse was a result of an order coming from the Trump administration.
The answer that we got in our meeting today is no. This is not an order coming from the new administration. This is not a new directive. This is, as the county judge said, an extraordinary, unique, individual event. The special agent in charge admitted that there are lessons to be learned. We wanted to hear that. We heard that. In fact, he said there would be better coordination with the county attorney and the county judge going forward. And he committed, after the county judge asked for more training for enforcement agents going forward.
Okay, again, the agents said that they were targeting someone who had a criminal history. Why was there so much backlash that this particular operation happened at the county courthouse?
I think there was really 2 things. The first thing is that it's been fairly widely reported that the information that ICE had about where she was and what she was there for came from her abuser. And there are many protections built into law, both in the Violence Against Women Act as well as in the statute itself, that state that ICE should not take enforcement action against someone based solely on a tip for an abuser. So that's the number one thing. As advocates for survivors of crime, we're obviously incredibly concerned about survivors of crime always being able to obtain those needed protections from the law. And then the second thing was that they lied. I mean, I think it's fairly clear at this point. I mean, their official affidavit has been released, or at least parts of it have been released, and they stated they apprehended her, encountered her the first time outside of the courthouse, I'm sorry. And it's clear that they entered the courthouse and they sat there and waited for her to come out of her hearing. I mean, they arrested her with her protective order in hand. And I think that when that doesn't concern people, when survivors of crime can't seek the benefits and the protections of law enforcement, I think that should be a concern for everybody.
And we did have someone tweet me tonight. Veronica Rose said, doesn't Mrs. Gonzalez's detainment violate VAWA? And I think that you spoke to that. We do have some people who have called into the show. We love to hear from you, those of you watching. Let's go ahead and listen to the first caller.
Well, I'm glad that they're finally going into taking the people that have records and felonies. They've been living here like that. And it's about time they did something about it. You know, people are getting mad because they're doing that. And why are they getting mad if they have felonies and records and murders? Now, if they did something to your family, I'm sure they wouldn't be happy about it. So I'm glad on that. There's a difference, and they're getting mad. They don't even see the whole picture. It's just the idea that sometimes the media plays it, and they get riled up. But I'm Hispanic, and I'm for it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for calling. Let's go ahead and listen to one more call. Go ahead, caller.
My question is, if the courthouse is a safe haven, what would be if the illegal alien decides not to come out because he or she will be arrested? Could she stay there overnight and will just be protected, even though they have a criminal record? That is my question. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for calling. And I believe something like this was happening where I think it was a Colorado woman who was taking refuge inside of a church. Yeah. That is another one of these safe places.
That's correct. The federal law has long had some locations that are considered to be safe places, safe havens. Churches are often considered safe havens, and schools are often considered safe havens. Courthouses generally are not, and so courthouses, are somewhat free reign as far as ICE is concerned in terms of enforcement. But I think the concern here is that, again, that she was a survivor of crime, and that it's been widely reported that the only reason that they knew that she was there was because the information came from her abuser, and that's incredibly concerning. Okay. And to respond to some of the other callers, I mean, the concern that we as advocates have is not, we work within the system. I'm an attorney, I'm subject to the ethical rules, I'm subject to respecting the law. The concern that we have is that there have been numerous reports when these enforcement actions take place that people's civil rights and human rights are not respected, and that's where the concern comes in. You know, I think I certainly have a healthy level of respect for law enforcement. They're there to do a job, and I don't have a problem with that. But I'm also here to do my job, and my job is to make sure that people's rights are protected, and I'm going to do whatever I have to do that.
All right. Well, we still have a lot to talk about tonight. You are watching ABC-7 Extra. When we come back, federal judge declines to release a young dreamer who was detained by immigration officials last week. What options, if any, does he have left? And we want to hear from you tonight. Remember, you can call our comment line right now, 915-496-1771. You can also email us, ABC7Extra at KVIA.com, or tweet me, Guadian, ABC7. Just use the hashtag ABC7Extra. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Sunday Extra. A federal judge in Seattle has declined to release a young dreamer who was detained by immigration officials last week. Daniel Ramirez Medina has been in the U.S. since he was 7 and had been able to stay in the country under the Obama-era Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. Andy Rose picks up the story.
A federal judge in Seattle declined to release a 23-year-old immigrant from detention Friday, a week after he was detained by U.S. immigration officials. While there are still no charges levied against him, ICE officials said Daniel Ramirez Medina admitted to them he was a gang member, something Ramirez's attorney strongly denies.
Those are 3 public statements that have been repeated over and over again in the national and international media, and for which there is not a shred of evidence. And that calls into question the credibility of the Department of Homeland Security.
His detainment has sparked protests around the city. Ramirez was taken into custody last week when ICE agents were serving an arrest warrant for his father. According to the lawsuit, agents asked Ramirez if he was there legally, and he assured them he had a work permit.
We're not aware of any case in the United States where a DACA beneficiary has been brought into immigration proceedings like this. We've heard of isolated mistakes, but they have been corrected right away.
Ramirez's parents brought him to the U.S. as a child. He has twice been granted deferred action and a work permit under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program, according to his lawyers.
This could affect hundreds of thousands of people, and so we're hoping that we can get the courts to establish standards to protect everybody from being snatched from their homes.
I'm Andy Rose reporting.
And joining us again to talk about this issue and more, immigration attorney Melissa Lopez. I want to thank you again for being here. So I sort of teased that going into this segment, what options does he have now?
Sure. I mean, the first thing and most important thing is that President Trump hasn't taken any positions on DACA officially. I mean, he made the comments during a press conference that this is a tough issue for him, and I don't know that I necessarily believe him when he says that, but that's what he said. But there hasn't been anything official. So, the fact that he was detained does not mean that his DACA is immediately revoked. So it's going to depend on what President Trump decides to do with DACA, the program as a whole, as to how this is going to affect Daniel.
Yeah. I have to believe that there are families, watching tonight who are concerned about what is happening nationwide. What advice do you have for them if they or a member of their family are here under DACA?
Sure. I mean, the most important thing, if you listen to the story, was that ICE officials were there to detain his father, and they arrested him as a result. And so I think it goes back to reminding people of what their rights are. I mean, just like in a criminal situation, you have a right to remain silent, you have a right to ask for an attorney, and you have a right to ask to see an immigration judge. And I think that that's really important for people to enforce their own rights when speaking to law enforcement. And unfortunately, these situations just create a lack of trust in ICE. And so people are going to continue to not speak to them, not cooperate with them, because they're scared about whether or not they're being honest with them.
And I can imagine this has got to be like a roller coaster ride, for folks who thought that with DACA they were protected, and now with President Trump, really the future uncertain.
Sure, and it's a little bit odd for me, but I was one of the few skeptics when DACA came out. I mean, I was worried about exactly this scenario, and I kept hearing, no, that won't happen, that won't happen, and unfortunately here we are. So it's definitely a difficult time for us as immigration attorneys, because traditionally we've known what to expect, we've known what could and couldn't happen, and so we could inform people and give them some information and some semblance of reassurance. And it's difficult to do that right now. It's difficult to be able to reassure people and give them hope, because we really don't know what's going to happen, and we're kind of living in a whole new world right now.
Waiting game.
Yes.
Okay, we want to hear for a couple more people who are calling the show tonight. Go ahead, caller.
Good evening. I just have one question. Weren't these deportation orders in place even before Trump took the presidency? From what I understand, doesn't it take a process for this to take place? Also, if these people have criminal records, what are they doing here? I've called 911 and I don't get a response, because sometimes they'll show up and they'll say, well, nothing's happened yet, so we'll wait. So I just don't understand why this is the case. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Wayne. The reason why I was calling, I'm concerned about the northern border. There's all kinds of emphasis put on the southern border, but I have family and friends in the northern border who have other family and friends who are coming in from all over Europe and everywhere else. But all the emphasis is actually being put on the southern border, and I'd like to know why. Thank you very much. Bye.
And thank you very much for calling. Melissa, you just said an interesting point.
Sure. I think, the current administration is focused very much on the southern border. You don't hear them talk about, undocumented immigrants from Europe. You don't hear them talk about undocumented immigrants that enter through the northern border.
We're getting a lot of calls on tonight's topics. Let's go ahead and listen to some.
Yeah, a lot of these people who are here illegally, you hear of them being here 20, 25 years and even longer. They don't want to fix their papers, because once they fix their papers, they get no more free medical. And they also, once they become American citizens, they have to requalify for all the freebies that they're getting.
Illegal immigrants are illegal immigrants. They went after that lady in the courthouse because, or whoever it was, lady or male, transgender, because there was a felony record, and those people have to be asked to leave. The fact that county judge and O'Rourke were involved in this, there's a law. There's a law, people, that we need to follow, and we need to do that. So please, let's get over it. It's about time it started in El Paso. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks for watching tonight, and thanks for your call. Melissa?
Sure. You know, again, going back to, it's also written in the law that she should not have been arrested based on a tip provided by an abuser. So if we're concerned with following the law, let's follow all the laws, not just the ones that are convenient in certain circumstances. And that's all we ask for.
Okay. Again, people going back to they're criminals, they shouldn't be here, why are people getting upset? Your fear is what?
That we're going to be further divided as a country. I mean, I think, unfortunately, this issue has really brought out a lot of underlying tensions, and it's really divided us. And unfortunately, a country divided is not going to be able to take any positive actions towards immigration reform. You know, people keep saying have people stand in line. Well, then let's make the line system a fair system that people can actually benefit from, instead of it being a system where it's virtually impossible for a lot of people to get a benefit.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take a couple more calls tonight. Go ahead, caller.
People with criminal backgrounds and they're here illegally. Well, they're here illegally to start with, but if they go ahead and do crimes on top of that, like this particular lady did in the past, you know, then she should be apprehended. I don't know whether she should be apprehended the way she was, but she should be under arrest for breaking the United States or El Paso law.
The female, who was really a male, was arrested at the county courthouse for having been a felon, and yet she is the victim. Also, aren't other people arrested when they go to court if they've got warrants or other outstanding criminal actions?
All right. Well, thank you, callers. Appreciate you weighing in on this issue tonight. You actually had a response for this?
Sure. The only other thing that I wanted to mention is that crime victims actually have a benefit under the law called the U visa. And the way that works is, even if somebody has a criminal history, what ultimately happens is United States Immigration and Citizenship and Immigration Services, what they'll do is they'll actually weigh the criminal violations and immigration violations versus the victimization that the person has undergone, and then ultimately make a decision about whether or not to grant or deny that benefit. But crime victims do have a benefit that they're eligible for, and actually, you know, there are waivers built into the law for people that have criminal history. Obviously, the more extensive the criminal history, the harder it is for somebody to obtain legal status.
Okay, so final thoughts on this. How are you hoping President Trump acts in the future?
I mean, I think the most important thing that hasn't happened up to this point is that his executive orders are vetted through the organizations that they affect. It's my understanding that the first executive order related to the ban on travel was not properly vetted through the Department of State, through the Department of Homeland Security, and so as a result you had a big mess in terms of its implementation. And so I think it's important, you know, these systems of government are in place for a reason, and, you know, although he ran on a platform of changing things in Washington, some of these systems are there for a reason, and I think it's important that he learn to respect some of those systems and allow things to happen in a way that makes for an orderly implementation for everybody.
Okay, and he has said that we could expect some more news on his immigration policies coming up this week, so we will keep you updated on that. Thank you so much, Melissa Lopez, for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. We want to thank all of you for watching. Have a great night and a great week ahead. I'm Stephanie Guadian, and this has been ABC 7 Extra.